You want me to? Oh, you got it, no?
It seems to be working.
Okay, so I gave you a handout. Today we're doing mock counseling, so get your counselor hat on.
I left mine at home.
So on the back of your vicious flower, you have a healthy flower.
One that was wobbly, right?
So this is your healthy pattern, and this is your vicious flower. Use the vicious flower. The handout that has both is for you to keep. This one is for you to use during your mock counseling. The whole idea, this is not only for grief. We're going to go through a few grief things, and I'm going to give you a brief questionnaire. Everybody has some grief at different levels of their life. And we've talked all month about grief being divorce, grief being infertility, grief being death, grief being, even graduation. We have this one student, so interesting, because Mr. Pachi and I were talking about her yesterday. This is a really good student. She's an online student, and she does really well. And all of a sudden, her last 2 classes, she starts doing poorly. And we had counseled her a few months ago. We had helped her with an assignment. And she had admitted to us that she wasn't ready to graduate because she didn't know what she was going to do. And she wanted to go into grad school, but she wanted to take a break. So she's grieving being a grad student, or she's grieving being a graduate. Because then her identity, remember, your identity, your role, your status, all of these things change, according to Worden, when you are grieving something. So she started doing poorly. So grief comes in many ways. It's not just death. There's a death or an ending of some sort. Remember, we looked at attachment and detachment when we talked about Bowlby. Okay. So we've got this flower. Excuse my drawing. And what I'd like for you to do when you do your client is try to use your flower. This is going to be the negative thinking. Because all thoughts are erroneous. Do we hear this? All thoughts are erroneous. I was just talking to a client of mine on the phone, and I said this to her, and she's like, "What do you mean?" And her husband refuses to give her a divorce. And they're divorced not only in the law, but they're also married religiously. And she needs both divorces, according to her religion. And she's like, he refuses, now he's refusing to give me the divorce. And she's like, he treats me bad. And I said, erroneous thought. I said, maybe we need to explore why you're getting divorced. Maybe you've never looked at that. I'm not saying not to get divorced. That's not our job. Our job is not to tell the client to not get divorced. Our job is to help clients explore their thoughts, why they're believing what they're believing that's leading them then to a behavior, to a decision. So what do I mean by all thoughts are erroneous?
I don't know how to put it into words. I
Try.
know I want to say something, but I don't know how to put it into words. That was like a
Try.
brain fart.
Don't worry.
Our thoughts control our patterns.
Our thoughts absolutely control our patterns. Okay, but why does that make them erroneous? Good morning.
It's the
Nice.
power they hold.
Yeah.
Okay, they definitely hold power, but why are they erroneous just because they hold power? A lot of things hold power, but doesn't make them untrue.
I'm not blank.
I was gonna say like the status quo, like the your friend the whole example of her husband not giving her the divorce, he probably, like you said, he's probably like not wanting to because like the college student that she doesn't want to graduate, he doesn't want to be seen as a divorcee, like another failure, I guess.
Okay, so he doesn't want to be seen as a failure. That's an erroneous thought.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to see herself necessarily maybe stuck after graduation because she doesn't know what to do. An erroneous thought. I feel like I'm a loser because I'm now divorced again.
It just depends on the moment and the perspective that you have. That's always wrong because you always have a different perspective.
Okay, so your perspective, it's because all thoughts come from limiting beliefs. Where do we get our limiting beliefs? We get all of this from our parents. And we know, according to my model, we get this from conception. All thoughts are erroneous because they come from limiting beliefs. And most of us do not spend time questioning where they come from. That's what the vicious flower. I'll give one in a second. What the vicious flower is all about. Now, why is it called the vicious flower? Does it make sense why it's called the vicious flower?
It looks like it just repeats itself over because it's a vicious cycle.
The vicious cycle of the thoughts, absolutely. So these are the thoughts that during a session you can write down that the client says. It gives you a framework of what the client says so you could repeat back to the client of what is perpetuating the main negative belief. So this morning downstairs we were having coffee and I'm, in my pity party because I'm such a loser and I'm fat and I'm divorced and my hair is short and I'm ugly and I'm really easy, because it's everything. There's like no area untouched,
That's her keep inside.
and the exaggeration and the drama and all of the, and so there was a colleague of mine and he was like, where did you get so low self-esteem? And I said, well, recently, because it wasn't like that right before I started this job, it's recently because of this latest blow to my self-worth with my divorce. So you can identify where with a client things begin. With grief, oftentimes it's the loss that they're dealing with, and that's not a very uncommon thing. But when you're doing the vicious flower, even if there isn't grief, you can start identifying, and that's where you can start asking, well, where did you learn that fill in the blank? And that's a very good segue question, and this is all pointers for today when you do your mock counseling. Where did you learn that this equals beauty? Or where did you learn that, being divorced is an inadequacy? Or where did you learn that? Or what happened in childhood? Do you see how these are open-ended questions? That's one of the things for you guys that are new, because you guys are new, so we're, recapping a lot of stuff that we've been doing for the past 8 months. We want to ask open-ended questions. We want to try to stay away from yes, no. We want to allow the client to tell a story. The more that the client tells a story, the more we're listening, and we're listening for themes, okay? And we're allowed to write down information and then bring it back to them, okay? So here's the healthy form. Number 1, healthy adult mode instead of negative thinking. Number 1, automatic negative thinking. Test negative thoughts and beliefs. Number 2, ruminations and self-attacking. That's my favorite one. I'm the queen of that. Problem solve, develop compassion. So this is for you as the therapist. It's very important, and it was funny because I had my therapy last night and I was laughing today about it because my therapist is like the most validating therapist. She's awesome. And I made a comment to her and she's like, yeah, let's do it. And it's like, that's sometimes all we need is just someone that's like, I'm on board, let's go kill him, you know? Like,
My therapist is the exact same way. She said she could sign off that I'm certifiably crazy if I ever happened to.
right, exactly. And you need that level of compassion that someone can understand that where you're coming from, you know, obviously within norm, so that you feel, you know, that there's compassion. Mood emotion, recognize mood shifts. This is where we're looking at nonverbals. This is where we're looking at week to week. You know, is there mood shifts? Is there something that's off about the client? Withdrawal and avoidance, activate yourself, take one step at a time. Step 5, unhelpful behaviors, experiment with alternatives. This is where we're bringing in literature. Here, maybe you should read this article. I brought this article today, and we'll pass it around. And we can post this on the Blackboard?
Yeah.
Okay. Diagnostic criteria for complicated grief disorder. And there's 7 stages, and or 7 criteria. We'll post it on the Blackboard.
Complicated grief disorder is a new diagnosis that they've come up with that specifically, because most of the time when people have a loss, they're grieving, and the diagnosis is going to be major depressive disorder. Yes, they're depressed because they're grieving, but now they've decided that there's a difference between the two, and that so they labeled it complicated grief disorder so that they can specifically treat the symptoms that are related to the grief as opposed to just the depression.
That makes sense.
Can I have the last page, I think, is 11.
People.
The results, discussion, conclusion.
We'll read these in a moment. And then step 6, motivation and physical symptoms. But unhelpful behaviors, experiment with alternatives. This is where you give clients homework. This is where you give clients additional reading materials. This might be where you share your own story and you go, you know, I had this experience, this happened to me, I saw this movie last night, you might want to watch it. I read this article, for instance, this article, you know, I was reading that related to me because I feel like I have this complicated grief disorder. And you give them some alternative things. Remember, all we're trying to do, so this is one of the examples I use, we're all wearing a box, okay? You're given a box at birth, really at conception, but let's assume at birth. And you're wearing this box and it's full of your culture, it's full of your socioeconomic status, it's filled with information about your gender, your sex, your race, your religion, all of the things that make you up. And you go through life filling in your box with these belief systems about these things. Then you hit a crossroads and you go to therapy. The therapist's role is basically to give that box an erection. A tiny little erection. Just to say, let's get you to think out of your box just a tiny little bit. That's it. That's all we're trying to do. So when we're trying to experiment with alternatives, trying to give something different for the client to read or to see or to watch, like watching a TED Talk or something like that, that's what we're trying to do. Give them something to think beyond their box. And then number 6, motivation and physical systems. Take care of yourself. Take exercise. This is when you do something different. I'm a big believer, it's step 7 in my model, where we do a ritual or a ceremony. I'm a big believer in doing rituals and ceremonies. In grief work especially, ceremony and ritual is very big, because we tend to have rituals and ceremonies around things that we did with the deceased or with our partner. So honoring those rituals is an important part of saying goodbye. So this complicated grief disorder, now that I'm old, I have to, that's another thing I'm mourning. I'm mourning my good eyesight. My daughter will be like, I have 20/20, and that used to be me. I have 20/20, and now I have to be like, where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? I'm like,
Yeah, she'll get there too.
If it helps, my 12-year-old has astigmatism.
okay.
And one of the worst prescriptions a child at 12 years old can have.
Okay.
So, yeah. I don't think it's age anymore, I think it's environment.
So, DSM, okay, event criteria, prolonged response criteria. Bereavement, loss of a spouse, other relative, or intimate partner. At least 14 months have passed. 12 months is avoided because of possible intense turbulence from an anniversary reaction. Interesting. So anniversaries have a lot to do with it. So the anniversary of my husband leaving was January 11th. True story, Mr. Pachi was there. My clock stopped. My actual phone stopped working. It's as if on that day, the clock stopped, and we had to go to Verizon to get the guy to unstick it. And that's how I feel. That's exactly how I felt. I felt like my life had been suspended.
And what did I say?
And you said I needed a forced, what was it? A forced
Reboot.
reboot. And we went to the guy and he force rebooted it. And I'm really trying to make a force reboot.
Yes.
Okay, so in the last month, any 3 of the following 7 symptoms with a severity that interferes with daily functioning. So intrusive symptoms, unbidden memories or intrusive fantasies, this definitely I have, related to the lost relationship. So notice fantasies. Why do we say fantasies?
There's something we want so bad, we envision it in our head.
Okay, and what else?
It's not reality.
What do we do?
Plans.
Big word for Neptune. What do we do with people that are gone?
We relive them.
We do relive them, absolutely. And how do we relive them, Tanisha? Great word.
Like you said, it's through our fantasies, because our mind's gonna keep replaying them, or we find somebody to live through them.
Okay, but how do we relive the person that's gone?
Through someone else.
Okay, but I'm not looking for that particular answer. So let's just backtrack for a moment. In our childhood, we have an alliance with one of our parents, mom or dad, every single one of us. The ideal relationship is that mom and dad have the alliance and the child is out here. That would be the healthy way for us to have a childhood. That is not what happens. We end up having a tug of war. Mom with child and father is out, or father with child as mom is out. That's why I have father or mother crossed out. What happens to our view of father or mother when they're pushed out? One of 2 things happens.
Don't you start looking for the same things as the other?
The pedestal. The pedestal. That parent that is not around or is ousted, we either hate or we put on a pedestal. And the reason is that one side of the coin or the other side of the coin is the same coin. Whether we hate them or we put them at the pedestal, it's the same behavior. So that's why the word fantasy. When we have the loss of someone or someone leaves, we put them on a pedestal. So it's unbidden memories or intrusive fantasies related to the lost relationship. It's a fantasy that we're having about that person. We're putting them on a pedestal and we're forgetting some of the true memories. I am having difficulty remembering things about my marriage. What I'm remembering is things about the separation. Those, sort of pedestal moments. Number 2, strong spells or pangs of severe emotion related to the lost relationship. Very true. These, almost pain. It's painful. People will say that they bend over in physical pain because it hurts so much. Number 3, distressingly strong yearnings or wishes that the deceased, and you can substitute deceased for the person who's gone, were there. Signs of avoidance and failure to adapt. Feelings of being far too much alone or personally empty. This is interesting, and I definitely can attest to all 7 of these. But this idea of empty, this goes with the identity. Remember the other day when I was talking about identity, roles, and status? The who am I? Back in the day, women tend to outlive men, okay? Back in the day, women were so intertwined with the man paying the bills, the man driving. My mom was telling me a story the other day that my grandmother and my aunt never once in their life stepped foot into a grocery store. Never once. Can you imagine?
I wish.
What era was that? I would love to go back to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Would you?
20th century.
yes,
I mean,
knowing what I know now.
like I tell my mom, if the guy does everything, I'll stay at home and just do me. But
I
at the
don't
same
know,
time,
because you're pretty
it's-
rebellious.
Yeah, she'll be the ones like in the 1920s, like the women started to do whatever they wanted. She'll be one of those.
Be the leader.
Yeah.
So you gotta think about that.
I mean,
My grandmother and my aunt never stepped foot into a
So
grocery
because they
store.
could also feel stuck.
I'll be the right one.
Yeah.
grocery store not all that bad, so. Nobody-
It's horrible.
And then think of where else they probably
yeah.
never stepped foot into either. Yesterday I was watching this video about Muslims, this religious, it's this musician in Pakistan, and I don't know when this video was made, but apparently in Pakistan they weren't allowed to listen to music, and this musician in Pakistan who plays rock music, and he sings the Quran and stuff like that, and he went around talking to the religious leaders called the mullahs, and one of the mullahs said, you need to follow the Quran, and the Quran says women are never, ever, ever to leave the home. And then other things.
Yeah,
You go
that was
stir
after
crazy.
the revolution in the 70s.
So
There's
The
always somebody not
identity-
following the rules of somehow.
the
That's
identity of women, of who am I, now that spouse has passed, or any sort of ending, it really leaves you with this gaping hole. And I have a very dear friend whose mother recently lost her spouse, and there was by no means inequality in that relationship. If anything, my mom, my friend's mom, wore the pants, and she still feels it. Even in just going out with friends, she's sort of like the third wheel, because a couple gives you an identity, and it's like, do I belong now in the couple?
So as a mom, you can feel that way too. because you do everything as the mother, but then when you go to do your own things, even something simple like for me, journal writing, I'm like, okay, where do I start? I don't know what to do, or the kids are gone for a day.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll paint my nails, maybe I won't. It's like running into a wall all the time because you're like, okay.
Right,
I
you dream
feel
of having
this
this
role.
alone time.
Yeah.
But now I don't even know what to do with it.
No, I feel the guilt. I get guilty. I'm like, damn, why did I let him go? Or time, but what?
Because it's easier
Yeah.
for us to take care of them versus doing something for yourself. And that's
Right,
your
and
mother
that's
memory.
part of that negative thinking. Because what is the number one negative thought around motherhood?
Am I doing it right?
Doing it right, and it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job.
I want a vacation.
Right, Mr.
Yeah.
Raji?
And sometimes even more.
Even when you're sleeping.
Yeah.
Even when you're
While
sleeping.
dreaming, you're just like, I need to do this tomorrow.
I remember
Yeah.
when I was pregnant with the twins, and I couldn't sleep laying down because I was so big. I would sleep on the couch, sort of sitting up. And my mother's like, this is just preparation because you're never going to sleep again. Well, once you have kids, you never sleep again. You're always a light sleeper after that because of
I
your
can't
kids.
sleep now.
Oh, no, I don't know.
Oh, you're ready then.
I'm a
Oh,
heavy
you're like a mom
Yes.
because you've been like a mom forever.
I'm
so.
a heavy sleeper. I don't know about that one. It'll
Right.
take them shoving me, but I can see where as a mom, yeah, it will. It really will. Unless they're sick that night, and I'm like, okay, I need to stay semi-awake so I can check on them. By the time I fall asleep, I knock out. My husband told me he almost pushed me off the bed this morning because I kept pushing him to the edge. I woke up almost at the edge and then I pushed him. He said, I was about to push you off the bed.
I
And
would
you
have.
didn't move.
I would have. I would have.
See, I didn't say it for you.
You all
Agree with
over
them.
here.
No. But see, I can
But when
see-
they're sick,
I won't.
you won't.
No.
So that's that sense.
No,
Like,
when I start complaining about being a mom, my mom looks at me and she's like, you wanted kids, right?
Yeah.
Now you got what you wanted.
Yeah. It's that one too. Yeah.
It's not easy being a mom, is it?
No, everyone asks me, when should I wait till when you're really ready and you know who you are. That's the first thing I say is when
But
you
how
know
can
who
you-
you are.
I think you're never ready to
That
be
may
a
be
mom.
Yeah.
But I
I
was
don't think you ever
Yeah.
really know who you are.
Until the
Because
moment
that's
you
always
have it,
changing.
that's that. But you're never ready to be a mom.
I remember when my kids were little, very little, maybe they were still in high chairs, and my ex-husband and I went out to dinner. And it wasn't like a super fancy restaurant. There was a plate, you know, it was appropriate for kids. And this couple, this couple was sitting next to us, and they got up and they moved. And my ex-husband was an older man when we had kids. He was in his early 40s. And he's like, that used to be me. He's like, I would have never sat next to people that had kids. And the other day I was eating and there were people that had little kids. And I was like, wow, and now I have empty nest. You know, my kids have left.
I can donate stuff. I'm just.
And it's hard. Empty nest is hard. It
Oh, no, yeah.
really is hard because your whole,
Yeah.
you know, past 18 years has been caring for these kids, and it's a different type of care now. You know, my daughter the other day is like, Mom, I know that you want to parent me, you know, because now she's a college girl in Orlando, you know, I don't parent her anymore. It's a different kind of parenting. But your identity is changing, so it's just been a lot of loss from a lot of different ways, a lot of different role changes.
I'm ready to
So
get my
I'm
mama that
questioning,
loss.
who the
I'm
hell
ready.
am I? What was
I'm
that?
ready to get my mama that loss. I am ready.
But see, then it's harder for us when they start, like my son asked me not to go in the bathroom while he was taking a shower. And I always check that they scrub their toes, their hair, their ears, you know. Because it was just, I cut their hair one day and he had like a pocket full of hair in his ear. And I'm like, did you wash your ear? Uh-huh. So what's this? You know. And then he turns around and faces the wall, which I'm okay with because I don't particularly want to see that. He goes, I need privacy. I'm like, huh? What? No. And I had him when I was 16, so the first thing I jumped from was teenager mother,
Wow.
and he's my first one, so I'm like, I'm getting old. this is it, I'm getting old, life is over. But you feel that as they start becoming more independent.
That's
Yeah,
a form
'cause-
of grief, that's.
Yeah.
Because they're no longer needing you.
They're not your baby.
They just need you in a different way.
Exactly.
And now I have my kids that are older, they need you, they just need you in a different way.
You have to
And
learn how to let
yesterday I texted my son, the ones that's FSU, and I wrote, I miss you. And then he called me after he ate, you know. And it was nice that he just took the initiative to FaceTime, you know. But it's different, you know, it's different. Excessively staying away from people, places, or activities that remind the